The legend of the Headless Horseman was made famous by Washington Irving's novel, which told the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Hessian mercenary who was decapitated by a cannonball during the American Revolution and later returned to exact his revenge by stalking the surrounding areas of a Dutch settlement known as Sleepy Hollow. Since the story's publication in 1820, the supernatural entity has appeared in countless films and TV shows, including an episode of Scooby-Doo, Tim Burton's retelling of the story, and Fox's Sleepy Hollow show that brought the doomed Hessian mercenary to the 21st century. But is this story only rooted in fiction? I'm Bleaky, and in today's video we take a look at the case of the Headless Horseman, a story of an unfortunate soul doomed to wander the country roads in the dead of night, mounted upon his faithful steed. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow novel was written while Washington Irving was living in Europe, taking inspiration from popular German and Irish folktales, which included headless spectators riding horses. Another story that inspired him was that of Saint Gemolo, who came from Germany or Scandinavia and tells of the saint grabbing his own head after being executed and riding away with it on horseback. One of the most famous accounts of this paranormal entity originated in Germany and was the story of the Kopflosser Reiter, who appeared to those travelling in the forest to warn them of their approaching death. It's just a shame that there's never been a phantom basket of cookies to fulfil this role. That would be a much better way to break the news. In Irish folklore, the Headless Horseman was known as the Dullahan or Hobgoblin, that was said to ride a dark horse while using a human spinal cord as a whip and carrying his own severed head under his arm. Just like his German counterpart, this spirit is a sign of impending death to those unfortunate enough to witness it. The Headless Horseman was one of the many German stories collected by the Grimm brothers, which was turned into one of their many cautionary tales. In this variation of the tale, the Grimms explained that any person who commits the worst type of crime and are beheaded for their foul deeds will be deemed to spend their afterlife void of a head. Bedtime stories must have been so much fun back then. In another variation of the fairy tale called Hans Jägenteufel, a woman is gathering acorns near a part of the forest called Lost Waters when she hears a hunting horn and then a large thud. With a shadow covering her, she looks up to see a rider looking down at her, sitting upon a grey horse and wearing a grey cloak. The woman decides to ignore the man and carries on collecting acorns. The next day, the woman returned to the forest for more acorns. As she picked them up, the rider returned as he had done the previous day. This time, however, he held his head beneath his arm. This terrified the girl, who asked what or who he was. The severed head then told the woman that his name was Hans Jägenteufel, a man who drank too much and stole whatever he wanted in life. Because of this, he was damned to spend his afterlife in limbo as punishment for his sins. The lesson of this story was, of course, not to steal, or maybe not to drink too much. Is it too late to start dry January? Many other cultures have their own versions of the Headless Horseman legend, including Scotland and India. The ghostly rider was also included in a 14th century poem called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which tells the story of a brave knight of the Round Table who enters into a sinister game with the mysterious Green Knight. If Sir Gawain lops off the head of the knight, the Green Knight would return the favour in a year and a day. Of course he accepts, believing that no man could return after having his head lopped off, but after doing so, the Green Knight simply takes his head from the floor and leaves, waiting for the day he would exact his revenge. While there have been sightings of Headless Horsemen all around the world, a large portion of them come from the United Kingdom. One of the most famous sightings of this entity happened on the grounds of Ashton Court Estate, located in Bristol, UK. In the dead of night, when the sky is clear and moonlight illuminates the grand mansion and its grounds, several people have claimed to have seen a Headless Horseman slowly circling the estate as if he was looking for his head. Others have also claimed that they have seen a woman in grey accompanying the beheaded rider, as well as a pack of snarling hellhounds. When workers were carrying out renovations on the mansion that dates back to the 11th century, they claimed that their equipment would be scattered all around in the morning, despite how neatly they had left it the day before. Now, I can believe this story. I can't tell you the amount of times that a spirit has left my kitchen a complete mess after I did a spot of cooking. Yep, those messy sauce spilling, dirty plate leaving ghosts. It is said that the Headless Spirit was once a servant who was tasked by the estate's owner to bury and protect a large volume of treasure somewhere on the estate before the Civil War of 1642. Sadly, both men died before the war ended, and the threat of the mansion and its goods being forcibly seized had passed. The servant, who had been loyal throughout his employment, returned to the grounds after his brutal death to keep watch over the fortunes that are still lost to this day. In recent years, a paranormal team visiting Ashton Court Estate happened to take some photographs and caught what they believed to be the Headless Horseman, although it could be argued that this spirit looks like it's got a head. Regardless, a human-looking form can be seen, as well as the legs of a horse. Another case of a Headless Horseman was reported in Garden Lane, Doncaster. The Conisbrough Paranormal Research Association has been investigating the legend for the last couple of years, with the spirit said to have participated in the Battle of Mousebray in the year 487. The story tells of a Saxon soldier with strawberry blonde hair and a beard who was viciously chased by the enemy and was brutally slain in the neighbouring field next to Garden Lane in the village of Cadby. The founder of the team, Dean Buckley, and his wife Veronica, who was also a spiritual medium, claimed to have spoken to the spirit 2 times during their investigations, where the spirit explained how his horse had been injured by an arrow, which allowed the enemy to catch up to them. On one occasion, they also heard the sound of galloping horse hooves thundering down the lane behind them. When they turned around, they couldn't see anything but the darkness engulfing the long stretch of road. Another fascinating account happened in the late 1980s when Richard Williams was driving home from the factory he worked at in Highbridge in Somerset. One dark morning, at 5:30 am, Richard took the same route he had done for 3 years. As he drove down Buncombe Hill in Bridgewater, however, he spotted a sight that chilled him to his core. Sat upon a horse, beneath the shadows of a group of trees, was a man wearing a long leather tunic, which he called a poncho, and one more disturbing detail. This man was void of a head. Richard had told the newspaper that if it was a living person and that the shadows had just obscured his head, why was he just waiting in the darkness dressed in period clothing that early in the morning? Blickling Hall is one of the largest estates in Norfolk, which has a history that spans back to the 1400s, although the mansion that stands there today was built in 1611 on the ruins of the former building. In fact, it is said that the previous building was Anne Boleyn's birthplace before she moved to Hever Castle in Kent, where much of her courtship with Henry VIII happened. While none of the original buildings have visually survived, when the new building was built, some of the walls of the ruins were incorporated into its construction, hidden behind wooden panels. Anne Boleyn was famously beheaded by her tyrant husband after he grew frustrated that she had not bared him a male heir to the throne. He also had her brother George executed for having relations with his sibling, as well as adultery, crimes that were completely made up so Henry could have an excuse to move on to his next wife, which to me seems a teeny weeny bit excessive. After the execution, Anne was wrapped in cerecloth, which was a traditional wax-coated burial shroud, with her head tucked beneath her arm because the bow chest, used as a makeshift coffin, was too short for the woman. Since her brutal and unfair execution, the headless ghost of Anne Boleyn has been said to return to her childhood home on the 19th of May, the anniversary of her death. As day turns to night, and the screech of owls are carried through the swaying trees of the estate, several people have reported seeing a coach pulled by 4 spectral horses and driven by a headless horseman heading along the driveway to the house. In the coach, Anne Boleyn is said to sit with her head resting on her lap. Those who have seen the phenomenon have said that the spirit fades away as it arrives at the mansion. Soon after, Anne has been seen entering the house wearing a white or grey dress and has been seen and heard roaming the corridors of the grand building until the first rays of sun flood the windows. Another well-known legend comes from Butterton, located in the Staffordshire Peak District. The story tells of a farmer who had sold 4 cows at the May Fair in the early 1700s, who had celebrated his successful trip by sampling the strong ale brewed in a local tavern in the village of Leek. When it was time to return home, the farmer put his trust in his faithful horse to bring the drunk and tired man back home. Unbeknown to the man, however, 4 men had been following him as he travelled up Dose Lane and over the top of Morwich. The men managed to get in front of the farmer and jumped out. One man grabbed the bridle while the other 3 dragged the terrified farmer from his horse. One of them then clubbed the man over the head while another began hacking at his neck with a sword. After several strikes, the head rolled away from the body. The robbers quickly took the money earned from the market and then waited in a barn for darkness to fall. When they were sure that they would not be spotted, the men lifted the headless farmer back onto the saddle of the horse, with rigor mortis stiffening the body, which helped it sit upright and hold the severed head beneath its arm. They slapped the behind of the horse and allowed it to take the body away. Now, this horse was well versed with the route home. Around midnight, the horse and the body of its master returned to the farm, to the terror of his poor wife. Although people had witnessed 4 suspicious looking men hanging around the area, they were never caught. Since that day, the headless ghost of the farmer can be seen riding the lonely moors on the 1st of May every year. In the 300 years since, there have been many sightings of the headless horseman. One claim in the Butterton area tells of a farmer who was walking home after having a few drinks. Eventually, he found a rider waiting on the road. Without looking at him, the man asked if he could have a lift home. When he got no answer, the farmer looked up to see a headless apparition, who then grabbed hold of him and began galloping down the country road. The horse leapt fences and hedges, all along dragging the poor man behind, laughing sinisterly as he continued to increase his speed. When he got close to his home, the horseman let go of the man. Somehow, the farmer managed to crawl back to his house, where he died several days later due to his injuries. On another occasion, a different farmer and his wife were travelling along the road when another rider caught up to them. To the horror of the man, he saw a spectral form void of a head, which also caused their own horse to tremble and their dog, who was following behind, to howl at the supernatural entity. The wife couldn't understand what was happening, unable to see anything. The horseman then just galloped off. At first, the farmer refused to believe what he had seen, but after several sleepless nights, he confessed to his wife. The day after speaking about the horseman, their horse dropped down dead as it was ploughing a field, while the dog got sick a couple of days later and also died. Fortunately, the farmer was spared the effects of the ill omen. In an article published in the Sentinel in October 1880, the journalist explained how the stories had made many travellers paranoid, with even squeaking signs hanging above the doors scaring them out of their wits. It also told of highwaymen robbers who would don disguises of the Headless Horseman to scare their victims into giving up their goods. One of these men was William Firm, who lived at Bottom House near Butterton Moors, who was arrested and hung in Stafford for his crimes. According to the same article, 7 priests were called in to exorcise the spirit. According to these clergymen, the spirit spoke to them and said that he had become one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse following his brutal death all those years before. In 1920, a local journalist set out to see the phantom for himself, gathering a group of Labour League members to help him track the horseman down. The journalist also included an interview with a Mrs. Wood living in Back Lane. She said that when she was a girl, she was travelling home from the Mayfair with her friend. Darkness had already fallen over the moors and the moon was lighting the way. Suddenly, they heard the sound of horse hooves galloping towards them. Terrified, the 2 children jumped over the wall and peeked over. Their blood ran cold when they saw the Headless Horseman rush past them and turn straight into a building on the opposite side of the road, vanishing into the brickwork. When the article was published, a local farmer backed up the account by sharing his experience of seeing a cart being pulled around on its own at a farm in Dowse Lane, the place that just happens to be the location where the farmer was murdered by the robbers in the early 1700s. In 1933, 2 groups of walkers decided that they wanted to know if the ghost story was true. The first group saw nothing, but the second, which also included a press photographer with a special synchronized flashlight camera, was certainly eventful, but not in the way that they wanted. You see, the news of the ghost hunt had spread, which attracted a huge group of rowdy locals from surrounding villages, forcing the search to be called off. So, could there be any truth in the stories of the Headless Horseman reported all around the world? In 1798, General William Heath, an American general who oversaw the Battle of Manhattan, reported that an artillery shell took off the head of a Hessian artilleryman, with another killing his horse. The account of the Headless Hessian and the fallen horse nearby could have captured the imagination of artists and writers like Washington Irving. In 1870, several doctors in the UK offered a more earthly explanation for the sightings of the Headless Horseman. In The Lancet, a famous London medical journal, an insert shared the account of a bizarre event during the Franco-Prussian War. On the 6th of August 1870, at the Battle of Worth in Rhine Valley, a headless French horseman was spotted galloping across the battlefield in full view of the other soldiers. The writer explained that during a sudden death, the muscles in the body can constrict and can continue working in the same position that they were holding beforehand and become rigid. If the soldier was beheaded while galloping on a horse, then it would explain how the body stayed upright while the horse stormed across the battlefield. This was backed up by a letter sent to the editor of The Lancet in January 1871, with Dr. Logan Russell giving a few examples of lifelike rigidity in death witnessed by doctors, nurses, and soldiers during the American Civil War. In the letter, the doctor explains how he had read accounts of several cases of rigidity after death, which resulted in the corpses posed in the action that they were in just before losing their life. One account tells of a soldier who was shot in the head but was left leaning against a tree with the butt of the gun still pressed against his cheek, with one eye still closed, as if he was aiming. While these rational explanations could explain how the ghost stories were inspired in the first place, what about all the accounts of the Headless Horseman appearing during peacetime or having a spectral form? Were they just figments of imagination, fueled by fear of the darkness and the legends of the horseman? Or are the galloping hooves heard echoing in the distance a paranormal warning of impending doom? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch more supernatural and paranormal content, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And until next time, sleep well, friends.